Well, okay. In the summer, what I like to do in the summer is jump into a narrative, we call it. And a narrative, when you talk about a narrative in the Bible, it's not like one of Paul's letters that's instructional. It's a historical narrative of something that happened. And so in years past, we've gone through a gospel. Love doing a gospel in the summer, and we just kind of rush through it, boom, through a gospel, which is actually very good for us to do. But this time I thought, is there a narrative in the Bible that we've never really looked at? And one of the biggest narratives is the first 10, 11 chapters of Genesis. So that's what we're going to do. And like I mentioned last week, we normally, in fact, a lot of Christendom stays out of Genesis 1 through 11 because they're a little embarrassed by it. Because it takes a lot of flack from the scientific community. Well, I'm here as a trained scientist. I worked in research science for half of my life, and I'm here to tell you it holds water. So you're going to see a little bit of bent from me from the scientific side as we go along, but not too much, because I don't think that Genesis 1 through 11 is written to satisfy the scientists of the 21st century. It's written to communicate something much more powerful and something much more endearing than what just science is all about. So if you're thinking this is going to be finally an apologetics thing, we're going to finally say, this is where science and the Bible, we're going to actually duke it out right here and have a boxing match. No, we're not going to do that. I'll bring up some things as we go. But what I want you to see is that Genesis 1 through 11 is nothing to be ashamed of. It's just a remarkable set of things that God has placed. And in fact, when I say it's foundational, I mean that in every way of the word you can think of. It's foundational, not only to the existence of the universe, but to his plan for us in bringing us to himself. So you just got to know that. So today we're going to hit Genesis 1. So here's what we're looking at. Genesis 1 through 11 is the summer series, our narrative, and it basically covers 4 big topics: the creation, the fall of mankind, the big flood, with Noah, and then the Tower of Babel. And then after you get past those 4 topics, you're into very personal narratives, which starts with, in chapter 11, with Abraham. But before we get to Abraham, this is where we're at. So today we spin the earth spinner, and we're doing, bing, creation, okay? So every week, I get a little carried away, I know. Summertime's also a little more goofy when it comes to animations. Okay, so we're doing creation, and here's what we're going to do. Verse 1, are you ready? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. The end. We're done. And in fact, it would have been okay for God to have written the Bible and written verse 1, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth, and then verse 2, and then there was this guy Abraham, and just keep moving and talk about the story. But God wants us to actually get into this a little bit more. If someone asked you, where does the universe, where does the earth come from? You can say, well, God made it. The end. And that should be enough. Now, I stop here kind of silly in a way because just this statement right here gets everyone's, hackles up. I guess that's what the word. Because we're saying that this place is not a place that just kind of created itself. It came out of some kind of scientific accident. It was some deterministic, deliberate thing on the act of a super being that was before all of this ever existed. It came from God. Now, in science today, and this will be my last science comment for the day, by the way. In science today, there is no room to admit for the fact that God might have made this place. Every time a scientist looks at nature and examines what's in nature, they cannot come up with the option to say, it looks like it came from a super being. You can't say that. And why can't you say that, even if everything points that way? Well, because that's biblical. Clear, and that's it. If it has a biblical interpretation, you can't say that the science evidence points to that, because that's just not on the table in terms of, options to explain what you see. It's got to come from some naturalistic, and that's what they use, some naturalistic explanation, which means it came from itself somehow without any kind of outside intelligent influence. That's the only option on the table. And the minute that you start talking about the fact that, well, this evidence kind of points to an intelligent maker, when you get to that point, you're out of there because you're religiously biased, even if the evidence points that way. So I want you to understand that there's actually a ton of evidence in science that points to an intelligent creator, a ton of evidence. But scientists can't even breathe that, or else they get kicked out of universities. Why? Because it's the Bible. And that's kind of where we're at right now. So just to let you know, this is a gigantic statement all by itself. And if you stop before we race on to the rest of it, it implies a lot of things. You know, when I make something, when I create something, like say I wanted to create an end table for our house, you know, because we need a piece of furniture. I'm going to make it, I'm going to design it, I'm going to do it so it fits. I'm not going to make it 12 feet tall, I'm going to make it 2.5 feet tall. You know, I'm going to do it so it's actually smart. But in the end, I'll have a thing that's done, and someone can stand back and say, someone designed that and created that with a purpose in mind. With a purpose in mind. And it was skillfully made with a purpose in mind. So as soon as we see this begs a huge question. Why? What was the purpose behind God making something? Clearly, it implies that before that time, he could have just been doing what he's doing wherever he is pre-universe. But he started something, and that presumes a purpose. And that's, from the very outset of the Bible, that's something we have to grapple with through the entire history of mankind. If God started this place and made this place, then there must be some kind of purpose. And in fact, you get people who are on their deathbeds, who are not believers, who've never read the Bible, but even on their deathbeds, they'll say, what was my purpose in life? What was it all about? I mean, there's a presumption that's sort of built into our DNA and our minds. There's this presumption that there was a reason for it all. And we sort of know that. Well, right here, he's giving us that huge clue. And we'll talk about that more in a second. So anyway, someone says, wait. That's it? Tell me more about the earth part. I want to know more about the earth part. So God says, okay, let me back up just a little bit, and that gets us to verse 2. So the earth was formless and void, and darkness was over the surface of the deep. So it looked more like that. So see what he says? When he starts out his story just about the earth itself, the deep is waters. So there's waters over this ball. There's water, and there's no light coming into this ball. It's just dark. There's just darkness over this ball. And the Spirit of God was moving over the surface of the waters. Now, this is interesting because when he says the Spirit of God was moving, he says that what happened was it's not like this, you know, where you have an ocean with a bright sky. You have an ocean with a dark sky. It looks something like that. But with the Spirit of God, he's saying that there's an eyewitness account you're going to hear now. The Spirit of God was hovering over the waters. Someone was there during this entire process that's going to come up in the next several verses. Someone was there. The Spirit himself was there, and he saw. And not only does this tell us that there's a presence of God in all of this, it also starts to imply that there's maybe a more complicated being involved than just a father. There's a spirit here as well. And in the New Testament, we find out that the Son himself was the one through whom all the whole creation happened. So there's actually some Trinity popping out here in the process. But more importantly, and most people miss this, if we're getting an eyewitness account, then from this point on, we're going to get the point of view of the Holy Spirit. So where is the Holy Spirit in this process from this point out? Hovering over the surface of the waters. So you're not out in outer space now. The narrative coming up is not viewing it from outer space. It's not viewing it from the core of the earth. It's actually being viewed from the surface of the earth. So now he's going to write, if you and I were in his shoes, of course the Holy Spirit doesn't have shoes, but if we were where he was, this is what you would have seen. And he's setting that for us very clearly here. So you are here. That's your point of view. You are on the surface of the earth. If you could hover right there, below your feet is water. It's the deep. It's just water. It's just liquid. And above you, when you look up, is darkness. And that's where we start in this entire decision. So don't forget that. This is really important. That's your point of view, and that's how he's going to describe everything from here on out. So now when you get to verse 3, God says, let there be light. And there was light. And God saw that the light was good, and God separated the light from the darkness, and God called the light day, and the darkness he called night. And there was evening, and there was morning one day. Well, now, at the end of this, we'll get back to the light in a second. He's introduced the idea that there's going to be days in the process. So let's stick our calendar up here. So we've got 7 days in a week, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 days in a week. And we just finished day 1. And all we did on day 1 was we brought light to the sky when there was no light before. So here's what it looked like as we start the story. You're on the surface of the water. You look up, you see darkness. And after day 1, suddenly you see light. Now, don't go too far in what you're hearing here. All he said was there was light. He didn't say there was a sun. He didn't say there was anything else. There's just light. So as you remember your point of view, as you look up, you see light. There's just light. It's illuminated. And in fact, that's the better way that the Hebrew term is translated. It is not that there was light, but there was illumination. So there's light without a clear understanding of where the source of light comes from. That's really what the Hebrew is saying. Don't go past that. Don't say, well, in science we know that in the universe the only light comes from stars, and stars have hydrogen that are fusing, and so there must be stars. Stop that. Stop that. As far as we know in this discussion right now, there's luminosity. There's light that's going on. And that's going to be important in just a second here. So as you're standing there hovering over the waters with the Holy Spirit, you're saying to yourself, now God's going to start doing some steps with this earth. We happen to know where the end story is. We need to make this place habitable for living beings, right? Well, you're going to have light, because without light, there's no photosynthesis. Without photosynthesis, there's no plants. Without the plants, there's nothing for the animals to eat. I mean, there's just a ton of things you need light for. Good start. We have luminosity is where we go. Day one, it's bright. Okay. Day two, here we go. Then God said, let there be an expanse in the midst of the waters, and let it separate the waters from the waters. Now, if you're confused when you read that, good. That should confuse you for a second. Except in the next verse, he explains it just a little bit, okay? God made the expanse, that's some space, and separated the waters which were below the expanse from the waters which were above the expanse. And it was so. And God called the expanse heaven. So and remember where you're at, point of view? You're actually over the deep. And there's now light above you. You see light. And what he's saying is that now we need to create a space, a region, an expanse, something, a place that separates the water below your feet from the water above your head. Is there water above my head in this situation? Where does rain come from? Up there. Oh yeah, that's right. There is water up there somewhere. And there's enough, in fact, to flood places. There's so much water up there. So what he's saying is that now what I'm going to do is I'm going to separate that water above and the water below by something in between. What's that in between the water below? Right. So this is what we're looking at. This is Jim's really pathetic animation. So there's the water below. It's covering the earth where you're standing right there still. There's the lightness above you. And boop, there's something that now separates what's above and what's below. He calls that expanse heaven, and he calls the water below our feet the waters below and the waters above. Is this cool? Now, this is very hopeful for plants, because now the plants not only have the water above and maybe the water below, but now they have air. And that air with the carbon dioxide in it goes into the plants. They expel oxygen. Now we have an atmosphere system working. That's really good news. If you follow the landers that are on Mars right now, Mars has a very pathetic atmosphere. And because of that, you won't grow any plants on Mars. Well, there's a whole bunch of other reasons why you won't grow plants there either, but that's a problem. So here God's saying, okay, good step two. We have light, photosynthesis. Now we have an atmosphere to exchange chemicals in. Perfect. That works really good. And so now that separates the waters above from the waters below. By the way, too, he calls this atmosphere, this expanse, heaven. Now, if that confuses you, too, you say, wait a second, isn't heaven like where God lives over there? And it's like way past there. Here's a cultural thing with the Jews, and actually with almost every ancient culture at the time. The place that you stand on, this earth, okay, that you can occupy this earth as long as you're standing on it. And the highest you can go on earth is as high as the land goes. And they didn't have rockets and airplanes at the time. So basically, where we lived was on the surface of this place. Where we couldn't go was above it. So everything that man could not go to, that's the heavens. Now, over time, people used to say, well, I see birds flying in the heavens because that's a place that I can't go. Is that where God is? Well, no, there's also another level of heavens that looks like it's even a little above that, where the stars and the sun are, because it looks like the birds are flying between them. So there's actually a higher place where all the planetary things we see at night and during the day, that's kind of like a little bit higher sort of, but that's still heaven because I can't get there. I'm excluded from it. And then there's the place where God lives, which is so separated from me, it's beyond that. It's way out there. And so that's why when Paul says, I know a man who is taken up into the third heaven, he's not talking in LDS terms. He's talking about not the bird heaven, not the planet and stars heaven, but the place where God lives heaven, a place that I can't get to either. That's what he's talking about. So that's a very clear, repeated distinction that goes all through the Old Testament. So it's good to call this expanse heaven, but it's just the first of the heavens, the first of the places that I can't go to, the air place, okay? So just to distinguish that, There was evening, there was morning, that's the second day down. Okay, so after the second day, we've gone from a black planet with total water to now we have an atmosphere and we have light. So this is very hopeful for our plant things. What do we need next? Well, the waters below, let the waters below, God says, below the heavens, that's below your feet, be gathered into one place and let the dry land appear. And it was so. And God called the dry land earth, and the gathering of the waters he called seas, and God saw that it was good. Now, this is very good news for plant life, because now we have dirt. Woo! Now we have a dry place that they can grow in. It's a wonderful kind. There's more nutrients. So this is looking good for plants. So this is what happens right here. Boom! We have land, and the earth is called dry land, and the waters that gather together away from that he calls seas. That's the gathered waters below. This is looking really good. I would say, if I was guessing in this whole creation story, now we're ready for plants. All those in favor? Are we missing anything? No, I think we're there. So let's see where he goes next. Then God said, see, you knew. Then God said, let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees on the earth bearing fruit after their kind with seed in them. That's kind of a cool thing. By the way, he's going to mention several times after their own kind, which is a phrase of way of saying things that can reproduce in their own kind, create their own kind, create their own kind, create their own kind. It's not like cats having dogs and dogs having goldfish, because that's not after their kind. So things are after their kind. That's all he's saying. So there's reproducible things that are of their kind and implicitly different from the other things that are of their kind. So we're seeing separation in terms of creation. And it was so. So now, pathetic. Yeah, there's my plants. I looked for palm trees on clip art. They're very hard to find. Do you know that? So now we have stuff growing on the dry land. That's a good thing. And the earth brought forth vegetation and plants yielding seed after their kind, because the seed, when you plant it, makes a plant that's the same after its own kind. See, that's what he's talking about. And trees bearing fruit with seed in them after their kind. And God saw that it was good. And there was evening and there was morning, a third day. So we've made great progress. We started out hovering over this gigantic sphere of water with darkness above us. We have light, we have dry land, we have atmosphere, we have plants. 3 days, great progress. But we still need more, so here we go. Then God said, let there be lights in the expanse of the heavens to separate the day from the night, and let them be for signs and for seasons and for days and for years, and let them be for lights in the expanse of the heavens to give light to the earth, and it was so. Now, if you're saying to yourself, don't we already have light? This is an interpretation I like, which I think really fits well about this, is the fact that it could very well be that the lights of the universe, including the sun, all those things that are above there, have been obscured from your point of view where you stand on the surface of the earth. You look up, you see luminosity, but you can't pick out distinct sun, distinct moon, distinct stars. Why? Because there's something in the atmosphere. Something's blocking your view. Or maybe there's kind of detritus from the creation still floating around, chunks of the moon and things like that. And so really what you see, just to be literal from the beginning of this account, you see luminosity, you see light, but you can't tell where it's coming from. I would propose that at this stage, God doesn't make the sun and the moon. He clears out the atmosphere so you can pick it out now. Because remember, all we had was luminosity. Now we have sources of light. And I'll support that more as we go on, because I think it's a great interpretation. He says God made two great lights, the greater light to govern the day, the lesser light to govern the night, and he made the stars also. And he placed them in the expanse of the heavens to give light on the earth and to govern the day and the night and to separate the light from the darkness, and God saw that it was good. Now, if you're reading 16, you're saying, wait a second. It says here that God made this right during this fourth day. Actually, when you look at the Hebrew word for made, it uses a completely different verb, which, there's only 3 ways that verbs in Hebrew work, but this one means an action well completed, completely done, far in the past. So he could actually be referring to verse 1. In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. And now you can see them from your point of view, because you're not out in space, you're on the earth with the obscuring. Now, as we go on through the story, even when we get to the flood, we realize that there's something funky going on with the atmosphere of the earth. something, there's more water up there than you can believe. There's some obscuring going on. There's just the whole atmospheric structure of the earth is different all the way up through the flood. Here, it somehow blows away enough that you can actually, from your point of view, finally see these things. Now, he also says something else really interesting here. He says basically these lights are put in the sky to be a gigantic calendar and wristwatch for you. You see that? God placed them in the expanse to give light and to govern the day and the night, to separate the light from the darkness. Up at the top, greater light to govern the day, lesser light to govern the night. He made the stars also. There's a real sense from the ancient perspective that the lights in the sky do more than just provide light. You can look up in the night sky and you can tell what season it is. How? By the stars. You can look up in the sky and tell whether it's day or night. How? By the sun or the moon. You can even tell what time of the month it is by the moon. So in a real sense, what he's adding here is the idea that because God has made the luminosity now distinct, you see where it's coming from, you can actually now have a very good sense of time. And throughout all the ancient civilizations, the sky and the lights in the sky are used primarily as calendars. And that's what he's done right here. So now he's given a sense of time and given us an idea about where these lights have come from. And now we understand why at night it's dark and at day it's light. It's because these things, the sources, seem to be, from your point of view, moving. Sometimes they're gone, sometimes they're there. And we know that's from the rotation of the earth. So that hazy luminosity, there's light above us before, now takes on a different kind of thing that we would more recognize today. Maybe more of a real sky. Maybe now there's clouds. That's my guess, actually. But now you can look up, and instead of seeing luminosity, you can look up and now see the sources of light. That's what happens on this day of the creation. You can see them now. And because of that, you can mark time. Okay, so there was evening, there was morning, fourth day. We're doing great. Let's move on to day 5. Day 5, then God said, let the waters teem with swarms of living creatures and let birds fly above the earth in the open expanse of the heavens. Well, now we've used heavens 2 ways. Previously, we had heavens where the big, giant, glowing orbs are, and now we also have heavens where the bird flies. So see, what I told you was true. The heavens actually mean everything that you can't get to because it's above you. So, above the earth, open expanse of the heavens. And God created the great sea monsters, and every living creature that moves, with which the waters swarmed after their kind, and every winged bird after its kind. And God saw that it was good, and God blessed them, saying, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the waters and the seas, and let birds multiply on the earth. Because there are after their kind, we know that God made many different kinds of creatures, not just one that they all evolved from. He made different ones after their kind from the start. And by the way, one of those words up there in the Hebrew is the word behemah, which sounds like behemoth. You know which one it is? Monsters! Woo! Yeah. So actually, he's using a range of words to give us the idea that there's a lot of really different kinds of animals that are popping up right here of their own kind, both in the sea and in the air. And so they're going to fill these 2 places. So, sorry, that's my best clip art. Yeah, I know. I told you it was going to be kind of informal in the summer, so there you go. You get this kind of stuff. So anyway, the firmament, that's the heaven where the atmosphere is. There's birds in there now occupying that, many different kinds. And in the waters, there's many different kinds of created animals down there. Boom, it's teeming with them. And they're reproducing, and they're becoming more and more and more and more until they're filling this place with life. It works really well. We have all the right elements to make this happen right here. So, there was evening, there was morning, 5th day. Okay, we're moving along. So what have we left out so far? Well, yeah, we still don't have anyone living on the dirt yet. That's a problem. So we got to live on the dirt. So God says, let the earth bring forth living creatures after their kind, cattle and creeping things and beasts of the earth after their kind. And it was so. So he's distinguishing here familiar animals like cattle, and then beasts, which are just all the crazy animals that are out there, and creeping things that are too small to really count, like small things. They're just everywhere. They're everywhere after their kind. And God made the beasts of the earth after their kind, and the cattle after their kind, and everything that creeps on the ground after its kind. Again, he's emphasizing these are all unique creations. They're not related to each other. They're unique from God's hand. And God saw that it was good. So we got these guys. And, a question was asked last week. What about these guys? Well, I think they were there too. And we could do long debates about dinosaurs and stuff. But what he's saying right here very literally, he's saying everything that lives on this dirt God made. And there's dinosaurs. We could talk all day about that. By the way, I read recently that a dominant religion in our area considers that the bones of dinosaurs actually got here from another planet. Anyway, we'll just leave that where it is. And God said, we're not done with the people on the land. God said, let's make man in our image, according to our likeness, and let them rule over the fish of the sea, over the birds of the sky, over the cattle, over the earth, and over every creeping thing that creeps on the earth. Does anything disturb you about that phrase? Creepy? Creepy animals. Why did God have to make creepy animals? I'm tired of creepy animals. No. Look at the very beginning. How many people are making this? There's us's here. There's plurals here. Well, by the way, every time you see God in this opening creation statement, if you look in a Hebrew lexicon and figure out what word for God is being used, it's the word Elohim. El is the word for power. Him is plural. So it's the plural power person. So it's a way of saying there's someone who has so much power. We always refer to him in the plural. It could also be a backdoor introduction to the Trinity in a sense as well, because we already know that the Father's involved. We already know that the Spirit's involved. In the New Testament, we know that Jesus is involved. So, and then in Isaiah, I should have brought this quote out. In Isaiah, there's a phrase, God speaking in the first person, who says, I made everything all by myself alone. Okay. So there's already starting to be a blurring a little bit about who this super being is. He's one, but he seems to be many. Or plural in some sense, but he's still one. And then that oneness is reinforced very strongly in the word. Let us make man in our image. So what does that mean? Does that mean that God has a body like us? You could interpret it that way, but you don't have to interpret it that way. I mean, that's the obvious first way to do it. So God's got a body of flesh and blood. He's just like us. He walks around. That's the LDS interpretation of it. But as we go on and look, as we go through the narrative in Genesis, that's probably not the best interpretation. In fact, it's not probably, it definitely is not the best interpretation. There's another way to look at it. And in fact, we'll talk about that more next week. So let's make man in our image according to our likeness, and let them rule. So now we have a creator being, a super being, who has made this entire ball of life that's going on. And now he's making a higher creature to live on the dirt that is actually in charge of all those previous life forms. Wow. So in that sense, there's sort of an image of God issue going on here. I mean, God owns this place and owns the creatures, but he's giving this other creature now some kind of authority over that you'd think only the creator himself can have, but he's given it to him. Also, there's an implication of something else. Remember, before we talked about animals in their kind, after their kind, after their kind? Well, it's only animals after their kind who can reproduce and have babies after their kind. There is something about what he's implying here that maybe there's an ability for this creature, above all the other ones, to have some kind of relationship with the one who made him. Because there's a likeness issue. There's something similar enough, but not identical, something similar enough. It's implying the fact that maybe this creature, more than all the other creatures so far, may be able to catch and understand who this big creator is, because he's sort of in his likeness. For instance, take a dog, take a retriever or something, golden retriever, man's best friend. You see those pictures of, I just love my dog, Well, I can relate to a dog to a certain degree, and the dog can relate to me to a certain degree, but we're not going to have heavy talks about life's issues. Because he's of his kind and I'm of my kind. There's an issue about being of a certain likeness in your kind that you can actually have real interaction. And that's what he's hinting at right here. There's a hint that this new creature may be able to have relationship with the one who's making the place, because he's in his likeness. God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female, he created them. Well, we're messing with our plurals again. I thought this super being was making this other super sort of higher being, and he makes man singular, male and female plural. You're confusing me again, God. Well, now there's a plurality in mankind in his creation of man and woman. Now, here's the question. Which of the genders is created in God's image, man or woman? Both. So the next time someone says to you, oh, I'm sorry, women are kind of an afterthought from God, you say, no, they are both made in God's image, which means, and I don't want to get blasphemous here, but which means the qualities of men are a reflection of God and the qualities of women are a reflection of God. There you go, okay? Because we're both made in his likeness. Now, if you go through the Old Testament, you study the character of God, you look at how he interacts, there are times in which he interacts in a very powerful and I'll say masculine way, representing that side. And there's times where he's very caring and where he's very nurturing. And it's not blasphemous, but you see feminine qualities. That's because he's taken who he is and in making us in his likeness, he's split his character a little bit in half, so you see the two sides more distinctly. If you want to understand God, you got to understand both men and women because he's made us both in his likeness. Okay, I'm done with that statement. Okay. So there they are. Hey, we're happy. And yeah, I know. And God blessed them, and God said to them, be fruitful, multiply, fill the earth, subdue it, rule over the fish of the sea and over the birds of the sky and over every living thing that moves on the earth. So by the way, speaking of dinosaurs, could man rule over the dinosaurs? Well, according to this, if there were dinosaurs there, and I think there were, yes. Now, I'm not exactly sure how that goes. I mean, if you watch most scientific movies like Jurassic Park, you'd say, well, there's no way that man's going to rule over the dinosaurs because, in the very end, you see that banner, when dinosaurs ruled the earth, right? Well, there's something about this that even if dinosaurs are there, there is a supremacy of man that allows him to rule over every, not just some, every living thing that moves on the earth. Intelligence-wise, yeah. Yeah.
That show dinosaur tracks
with human tracks alongside dinosaurs.
Nests of dinosaurs with human tracks around it. These have been totally hidden by the powers
Yeah,
that be.
you can't bring that evidence out because it gets ridiculed is the problem. But there's something, and I can't explain it, there's something about the creation that God made of man that allows him to rule over even those beasts. And it could just be smarts. It could be, I see Crocodile Dundee doing this kind of thing. I really don't know what it is, but there's something there. Dinosaur eggs would make a great many omelets, is what it's. Yeah. By the way, before I read that, did you know that they found dinosaur DNA still intact that can be sequenced? You don't hear much about that either. And I chased this down a couple of years ago when it was pointed out to me by Kyle Smith, and I said, yeah, right. Well, right. What? But it's supposed to be gazillion million years old. Isn't it? It's petrified. How can you find DNA and actually sequence it? Soft tissue from dinosaurs exists. But you're not going to hear much about that either because it kind of goes against. Yeah, okay, so anyway, here we go. Let's go forward. So behold, I've given you every plant yielding seed that's on the surface of the earth, and every tree which has fruit yielding seed, it shall be food for you. So by the way, God started us out as vegans. Right there, it's proof, okay? And to every beast of the earth, and to every bird of the sky, and to everything that moves on the earth which has life, I've given every green plant for food. So cool. Okay, so everyone's eating basically the plants that they're finding, both us and the animals. And God saw that all he had made, and behold, it was very good. And there was evening, and there was morning, the sixth day. Well, we made good progress. So we move on to chapter 2, because he actually sums this up at the beginning of chapter 2. Thus the heavens and the earth were completed, and all their hosts. That's why I'm telling you, I think there's dinosaurs there. All their hosts. Everything is there. It was completed. The end. All done. Fini. And we've got this going on, and Jim exercises his cheap graphics one more time before we finish for the morning. Yay. And Adam and Eve are just really happy. Yeah, okay, whatever. Okay, let's get serious. So God, by the seventh day, this is chapter 2, verse 2, by the seventh day, God completed his work which he'd done, and he rested on the seventh day from all his work which he had done. And then God blessed the seventh day and sanctified it, because in it he rested from all his work which God had created and made. Now, this is the first reference to the seventh day rest, Sabbath, anywhere in the Bible. So everything that happens on this point on that comes up in the nation of Israel or anything else, it's there because of this. It's because of this. So you have to ask yourself a question. What? Why are we even talking about this seventh day? Why is rest an important thing? By the way, too, if I fast forward into the New Testament, Jesus, when he gets into one of his conflicts with the Pharisees about the Sabbath, when he's violating it, according to them, he says, my Father is active and working to this very second. So a lot of people have looked at that and said, well, isn't that in conflict with this? I mean, it seems like he went into the rest phase, but Jesus says, no, my Father is actively working to this very day. The rest phase here is about creation. It's about creation. Because you see, he says it. He rested from the things that he had created and made. So creation, in that sense, is done. But that doesn't mean that God's gone inactive and checked out and he's living in some condo on some planet. That doesn't mean that at all. He's still quite engaged, and Jesus says so. He's still engaged in working this very day. It's creation that has been completed, that work. So that's the end of the story. And there you got day 7, and you have rest, and he's trying to tell us something in that. Okay, wait. Back up a second. Did I miss Adam and Eve and that rib thing? Or about eating the apple and all that stuff? Did I miss? I mean, it just says it's completed and we're all done. No, next week I'll back up and cover that. Okay, never mind. Okay, so that comes up next week. So next week in the remainder of chapter 2, we actually turn it back a little bit and go back and look in detail at the creation of man. I mean, he already just covered the whole creation of man, and the verse we just read said, it's done, it's complete, it's perfect, we're all done. Let's go home, put our feet up. But now we need to back up just a little bit. So this is how Genesis is written like this many times. You know, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. Wait, I need more information. Okay, now we did the earth. Wait, where's the rib and the apple stuff? Okay, wait, we can do that. We'll go backwards. So this is how Genesis is written. Don't expect it to be one chronological thread. There's kind of like it goes backwards. And then this is one case where it does go backwards and you get more details. But you got the big picture today. Hold it. I've got 2 questions. What is it? Why did God do this at all? And is he trying to tell us something by doing the 6-day thing? Just something we never ask. But he did, so I'm glad he did, because we're going to look at that for a second. And we're going to wrap up with that. And by the way, everyone wants to know that. So here we go. First question, why did God do this? Jesus tells us. And listen to what he says. This is really cool. John tells us that the nature of God is love, for God is love. Now I ask you, though, if no one exists, who is God loving? For instance, we had the earth right here, the way we look at it, but back before the creation, it looked like this. So if God is love, who's he loving if there's nobody there? How can you call God is by his essential nature love if there's no one on earth to love? And Jesus tells us a remarkable thing. John 17. Jesus is praying to the Father, for you loved me before the foundation of the world. Before the foundation of the world. So before the foundation of the world, in the Godhead, there is already love. And Jesus the Son is saying that the Father is loving him there. What? Yes. There is, in a real sense, when you start exploring the whole idea of the Trinity in the Bible, you get this understanding that before anything was made, there was in God love in God. And Jesus is saying there was love that I received from the Father while I was there, before anything else was made. And so what's the whole purpose of this? Jesus goes ahead and tells us a little bit more. Here's this, if you be reverent, here's this closed party of love going on pre-universe in the Father himself. How an entity like the Father, how God can have love in the midst of God and still he's one. Okay, I got to admit, there's a little mystery to that. But Jesus is saying that's what's going on. There's love there. But it's like a closed party. No one else is invited. It's just going on, and it's healthy, and it's wonderful, and it's in God himself. And then Jesus later on says, not only did you, the Father, love me, the Son, before the foundation of the world? But 26, 2 verses later, and I have made your name known to them, that is the apostles and all the disciples who are following, and will make it known so that the love with which you loved me may be in them and I in them. So, the love that was in God himself before the foundation of the earth, Jesus was sent to say, we're opening the doors and we're sharing. We're including more than just here. We're including as many of the creatures that will want to be in this love. And Jesus is saying that's exactly what I've been spending my entire ministry doing, is letting them know that there's love in God, and now he wants to have us, his creatures, experience it. The door's open. The party's no longer closed. God wants to share that kind of love. And that is the purpose of creation. So anyway, here's the purpose. Here's the purpose. So that God, pre the foundation of the world, had plenty of love, but now wanted to share it with creatures. And so he goes through this entire process, this very elaborate process of creating a universe and a place that's got water and air and sun and light and animals, and there's all this stuff to create creatures in his image. That is, they'll be able to relate, and in that relating, they will discover the love of God. That's why this. That's it. That's the why of this. Jesus tells us that, really straightforward. So in a way, what God was doing through Jesus was putting out the welcome mat. He was putting out the welcome mat to mankind, saying, there is love and there's experience in the love of God that has always been in the Godhead, in who God is. And now God, through the creation and through the message, through the good news, has said the door's open to whoever wants to experience the love of God. He's sharing it. He's broadcasting sharing of it. But you got to go through that door. You got to say, I want to be where he is. I want to be with this God. I want to understand this creator God who went through all this effort to make us so that we can be included in the love of God. You have to walk through that. So the gospel really that we talk about is this. It's this welcome mat that says, for God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him won't perish, but go through that door and find real life. And that life is the love of God. It sounds tritely simplistic, but that is actually it from Genesis to Revelation. That's it. The inclusion of us in that love. Now, John also records Jesus' words when he tells the apostles after he says, I'm going to leave. He says, wait, in my Father's house, there's many dwelling places. And here's where he's basically saying the intention for all of created mankind is to come join him in this fellowship with the one in whose image we're made so we can relate and we can come and be with him and enjoy him. People ask, so what's heaven all about? What is the afterlife all about? The afterlife is all about being in the living room with God, enjoying his loving kindness. What's going to be in the living room? Is it paved with gold? Well, I don't know. But God's going to be there. And so the whole message, the whole good news of the entire Bible, again, Genesis to Revelation, is that here's this God who's so full of love that he opens his doors and wants to include anybody who wants to participate in it. Throws down the welcome mat, sends prophets inviting people, but they kick them out and kill many of them. Finally sends his Son inviting them for a welcome mat, saying, here's the good news. God loves you and wants you to be a part of this kingdom. And they killed him. There's a lot of people that don't want to participate in this. But don't make any mistake. This is God's intention. The parable of the prodigal son. That son goes out, takes all of the created wealth of the father that's due him and goes out and squanders it and realizes, after all, it's not the created wealth of the father that brings life to me. It's living in my father's house. And he comes back. And he comes back. That's the message of the entire Bible. That's why God created. And now, what was the second question? Is he trying to tell us something by doing the 6-day thing? And now this is key. This is never asked anytime I hear anyone talking about the creation week. Listen, God can make the universe in Genesis 1:1 style. In the beginning, boom! God created the heavens and the earth. We're done. So why does he decide to back up and relate it to us in a 7-day week thing? I mean, it's clearly it's a teaching concept that God's trying to get us to understand something. We're not getting it because we're spending a lot of time arguing about whether is it literally 6 days or was it 6 billion days, huh? What do you think? Forget that. Just forget that for a second. Why did God even do it this way? He's doing it deliberately, and God is a God who likes to teach us about himself. He's telling us something really key by doing the 6 days of work and the 1 day of rest. But what? Let's try. Are you ready? Here's our 7 days again. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. And God worked to do the creation through all those 6 days. And on the seventh day, clearly, he rested. And that's the big deal. He rested on that seventh day. Does God get tired? No. So why did he rest? Can God create it in a split second of a millisecond on day one? Yes. So why did he describe this to us as 6 days of work and 1 day of rest? God doesn't need the rest, and he doesn't need the 6 days to do it.
But we do.
Okay, here we go. Let's get agrarian for a second. Because in an agrarian culture, you get this. I had an uncle who was a farmer in Kentucky. You know his schedule? He would get up before the sun came up, and he would start doing chores around the farm. And he had a very small farm. We would go to family reunions to this farm. This is my mom's family. And we'd be there, and I'd never see my uncle. Why? Because he'd get up before the sun came up, and he'd go and he'd start working and doing stuff. And he'd be gone all day long. And, we're in the kitchen, we're eating food, and we're having our family reunion. Where's Woodrow? He's doing farm stuff, And then it would get to the end of the day. The sun would go down. He's still not around. Why? Because he's still doing farm stuff. In an agrarian culture like this, and like this, and like this, the issue is, if you don't put that work in, you know what happens? Your family starves. Not just you, your family starves. I mean, you have to put out. There are so many things that can take down your farm, and not just your livelihood, but the food for your children. Pests, rot, lack of water, fertilizing. I mean, you name it. Anything can take down. And it's not just a matter of, my garden did badly last year. I didn't get any tomatoes. But you didn't starve, did you? No. But they'll starve. They'll starve. So there really is, in created man in this agrarian culture, there really is a terror of starving if you don't work every single day. You've got to protect your crops. You've got to harvest them on time. You've got to pick the stupid grasshoppers off of that. I mean, you got to be there all the time. And I saw my uncle, and I've seen other people I know who are farmers. It's a terror. It's a terror. Your income doesn't just go down. You starve. And if you don't get enough this growing season to put some aside in the wintertime when you can't grow, you really starve. I mean, it's a horrible thing. Now, it's not just a terror and a desperation, but if you look at it from the perspective of a good father, a good head of household, if he loves his wife, if he loves his children, he has no business not spending every waking hour ensuring the fact that they're going to stay alive by going and working out there. So the minute you wake up in the morning, you go out and work, and at the end of the day, you work even past the sun until you cannot work anymore because it's too dark, and then you go to bed and you do it the next day, and the next day, and the next day, and the next day. And the next day. And if you take 1 day for yourself, you selfish little, if you take 1 day for yourself, you're doing it at the expense of the security of your children and your wife. Who do you think you are? And that's the agrarian mindset. You don't take a day off because it says you're selfish and you don't care about your family. That's the terror of it all. Now, when cultures finally got, say, a day off, you know what the kids would say? Mommy, what day is today? Well, Monday, Daddy's in the field. He'll be in the field all day. Tuesday, well, Daddy's in the field today. He'll be in the field all day. And then when this 1 day off comes, the kids are saying, Mommy, is this the day that we get to see Dad? Yes, because today he will have finished this week's work. Today we get to see Dad. The day off for a farmer is the family's biggest celebration because you get to see Dad. It's relational. It's relational. It's not just giving Dad a break. It's the ability to finally meet with him and live with him and rest with him and get to know him and go, Dad, I'm so glad to see you today. I've missed you all week long. And he can say, you have my undivided attention. I'm doing nothing else today. So you know a good picture of a day off for a farmer? It looks like this. Or you can stand back and say, I'm taking the day off. And every kid and every spouse and every person in the family will say, woohoo! Today we have nothing on the agenda except enjoying the one who provides for us. Did you hear that? Did you hear that? Did you hear that? Today we get to do nothing else but enjoy the love and presence of the one who provides for us. It's all relationship. So when an agrarian culture reads Genesis 1, and they see the Sabbath thing, they don't just see that God was tired and he needed a day off. They see God saying, I'm done with everything I need to do so that now I can be with you and you can be with me. Totally undivided attention with the one who, through his love, provided everything you need. Relationship. The seventh day is relationship. That's what it's not a mystery to agrarian cultures, but to us it's like, well, why do I not have to do it today on the Sabbath? No! What did Jesus say? Was the Sabbath made for man or man for the Sabbath? The Sabbath was made for man. First time the Sabbath comes up is in Exodus 16. And you know what the situation? You can't believe this. God has gotten them out of Egypt, out of the slavery of Egypt, which, by the way, they worked 7 days a week, 365 days a year. Sun up to sundown. There was no time off. Now they're in the desert, they're wandering around, they're saying, where are we going to eat? What are we going to find to eat? And the manna thing happens, and then God says basically, listen, what you do is if you pick enough manna in the morning, you take that up, pick enough for you to eat, to get plenty, get what you need. Some people need a little, some people need a lot. Go ahead and get what you need. But don't save it to the next morning, because if you save it to the next morning, it's all going to rot. Because tomorrow I want you to go out and take it again. I'm going to feed you every single day like this. But on the sixth day, magic happens. What do you mean? On the sixth day, collect up twice as much and eat half of it for that day and save half of it. Excuse me, won't it rot if we save it until tomorrow? No, that's the magic of it. God will preserve it for you so that the next day you don't even have to get up and collect food. God gave you twice as much the day before. So what do you do on that last day? Rest. And rest implies relationship. You don't have to have a divided attention for all this kind of stuff. Well, in Exodus 16, they didn't do that. They were still, they went out on that day where they had double the day before. They went, there's no manna out here. What's going on? And then Moses had to remind them, you guys need it. You took double yesterday, and it's okay today? Yeah, well, don't go out in the sun picking manna. You can kick back. You can relax. I mean, this is such a hard thing for them to learn. Because in Egypt, taskmasters, you never got any rest. And so there's this funny line. I remember reading in Exodus 16, there's this funny line that says, well, so Israel finally rested. And that's like us, too, because we won't rest. The problem is the Sabbath, this rest day, is meant so you can put everything aside and say, now I focus on us. On either, people that you're with that you love, but especially with this God who worked to provide for you everything you need for life. And now it's all about relationship. In a real sense, you're living a Sabbath life if you live day to day with a total dependence on the one who's provided 100% for you. And now you can spend the waking moments of your day relating to the one who loves you so much he's given. That's actually Sabbath rest, is what that is. So Hebrews is the last place you read about the Sabbath in the entire Bible. And this is what he says. Let me preface this for a second. He talks for a second just before this about the nation of Israel. They finally got to the promised land. They finally got to Palestine. But you know what? That really wasn't the capital R rest, really. There's another Sabbath rest. And that's where he picks up here. So there remains a Sabbath rest for the people of God. For the one who has entered his rest has himself, that's you and me, rested from his works. And why? As God did from his. So here's the entire idea. God wants you to stop working. And in that vacancy of not working, not being divided in your time, he wants you to enjoy his rest and his presence and his loving kindness. That's what it was all about. Now, I'm not giving you permission to, call in tomorrow to work and say, well, Jim told me yesterday that I don't need to work. That's not what I'm saying. It's more of a mindset is what it is. It's more of a mindset. There is a real sense in which even in the busyness of our lives, God is saying, but I want you to enjoy me. I want you to enjoy my love. I want you to enjoy this love that was always in God from the foundation. I want you to enjoy that. Are you completely, divided in your intention and time that you don't even have any time to enjoy me? Because that's what it was all about, was enjoying me. Is enjoying me. That's what Sabbath is about. There still remains for us a Sabbath rest for the people of God. Still is. Because God has said, listen, God has said, I'm done with creation. I'm done with all of that work. Now I'm yours, fully undivided. Won't you come home and enjoy me? Because I got nothing else. I got nothing else on my agenda. Creation's done, made all that stuff, did the dinosaurs, that's all done. It's you and me. And so now God waits on the seventh day, which remains open in Genesis. God waits on the seventh day to see who will respond and come to him and enjoy his loving kindness. That's what he's waiting for. That's why the seventh day is open. He's waiting for us to come home and to enjoy his loving kindness, to know that love. So that's the picture I want you to take out of Genesis. God in a sense, has made all of this, like Jesus says, a house with many mansions with many rooms. He's made all this for one purpose, not just to make your life comfortable, but to bless you with his undivided attention. But if you get so wound up with the terrors of providing for yourself, and if I don't do this for me, I'm going to die, and my family's going to die, my spouse is going to die, my children are going to die. If I don't keep going, it's all about me, I've got to earn, you'll miss him. The Sabbath rest of God can start right now. As you, in the midst of all that business, you step back and you say, God, I think I'm missing the best. I've been distracted by all the lesser kind of stuff. I want you and you alone. Delight yourself in the Lord, and he'll give you the desires of your heart, which is him. Which is him. That's why God gave us this entire story in Genesis in 7 days. There is a real sense in which God has put it all together, but now he has stopped and he waits. Just like a farmer finishes his work for the 6 days, wakes up on the seventh day, he's having his cup of coffee at breakfast, and he waits for his kids to come down the stairs. And he says to himself as they run into the room, this is what it's all about. And that's what God's waiting for you and me. That's the seventh day. That's the rest. Will you rest and come to him and enjoy life with him and enjoy his loving kindness? Because that's why this whole ball is here, so that you can understand his love. That's the message from Genesis 1:1 to the end of Revelation. A God who has so much love in himself that he creates a world and he brings a son as a savior to redeem us, to be part of his plan to know his love. And that's the simple summary of the entire Bible, set in the foundation of Genesis 1. Okay, let's quit. Father, thank you for this incredible account. And Lord, we still have a billion questions, but Lord, I don't want to miss the big statement you're making. That now we have your undivided attention and your arms wide open, and through the blood of Christ enabling us to partake in this incredible plan of drawing mankind to yourself, so that we might find life in you and life in the fullness of the richness of the love that you and only you have. And Lord, I pray that you through your Spirit would remind us when we get so wacky busy and so distracted that we think that it all depends on us, not only just for our families and for us, but we think that it all depends on us. And yet here you are, a God who in your loving kindness have provided so fully for everything we need. But I pray that you'd continue to teach us how in the midst of the busyness, how in our hearts and our minds we rest in the fullness of what you provide in your love. How do we do that, Father? How do we do that? Well, we know that in the end of that is rest, and in that rest is you, the Sabbath rest for the people of God, which can start today. So thank you for all you do for us. Thank you for this incredible plan, and continue to teach us like next week as we take a step backward and learn more about our own design, our own creation of mankind, which which even still further deeply gives us great understanding about your intentions and love for us. So thank you for all this now in Jesus' name. Amen.